Oh, it's taking pictures. And you guys are going to get a nice close-up of my face when you go to watch yourself.
A large cross looms over a valley where the grapevines won't intertwine. It is a massive monument and mausoleum, so quiet you can hear people breathing from across the chapel. And then a woman wailed and broke down, falling to her knees before spitting on the grave marker. Spanish police quickly ran over, picked her up by her shoulders, and handcuffed her. This mausoleum is Valley of the Fallen. It is the resting place of Francisco Franco, one of the worst dictators the Western world has ever seen. And this scene was my first impression of being outside of America. And I want to talk about it because it is a scar in Western history and serves as a reminder that Western ideals can't protect you from a dictatorship. This picture is of Valley of the Fallen as it stands in front of Madrid. Francisco Franco was a leader that isolated Spain, crippled their labor force, and restricted art. This is Francisco Franco in front of his troops. Francisco Franco rose to power because of unfair election practices and a debt that burdened the economy so badly that Spain wouldn't recover for the next 40 years. But after Franco rose to power, people found out that he was a dictator and a fascist, and that other countries would no longer trade with them because of Franco being their leader. And Spain couldn't produce enough food and enough clothes for their people. But the policy of isolation became necessary in order to protect them. And so Franco was determined to come up with policies to produce their own food and to make their own items and to be an independent nation that did not need to trade with other nations to get the things that they needed. But you can't have a nation like that where you can't produce all of those things. And Spain can only grow for a part of the year, so they only have food during the growing months. Francisco Franco, determined to keep his popularity, agreed to meet with Adolf Hitler during World War II and agreed to put his troops into the war in exchange for food, arms, and some more clothes for the people. But Hitler thought that these demands were too high and Spain did not enter the war. But the policy of isolationism was still necessary. That is why the next event occurred, which is a crippled economic labor force. And what ends up happening when you don't have anything coming in is you don't create any more jobs. And since Franco was a dictator, people that were politically against him started to disappear and no one ever heard from them again. But those people were also doctors and lawyers and teachers and jobs that you really need to fill. So what ended up happening is that people that were underqualified started to become doctors and teachers and lawyers. And so they had inadequate medical care and no education to the point where their literacy rate dropped below 20%. The workers were never found. Thousands of people went missing. And to this day, some of them are still unaccounted for. But a lot of them are buried at Valley of the Fallen, along with Francisco Franco, which is where Graham Keeley, an English journalist, did a report on the feelings of Spanish people that are their families for the people that are buried at Valley of the Fallen. And what ended up happening is people demanded that their loved ones be exhumed and reburied somewhere else, not near Francisco Franco. But there are over 45,000 bodies there that are unaccounted for and unnamed. And so the families are fighting the government, but I'm not sure that anything will be done about it. The last thing I would like to talk about is how Francisco Franco affected art in Spain. I interviewed Isabel Busquer Cantos, who is a Spanish citizen, and her family is one of the oldest Spanish families known to exist. And I asked her a little bit about the art in Spain because they keep recovering paintings that have been hidden in people's walls and in these secret rooms. Franco only allowed art of approved subject matter, which is usually religious scenes. And they did a lot of propaganda, which, like this poster, encourages people to join the Socialist Party in Spain. But a lot of the painters went underground during this time, and a lot of the authors books that usually would be translated into Spanish were translated very poorly so that the message was no longer even close to the original. These are a couple paintings. After the war was sort of over and Franco had died in 1975, painters started to come back out again in their response to the tragedies. Thousands of people really suffered because of one man and his ideals. And these are a few reactions. This painting is Salvador Dali's The Persistence of Memory, sort of his response to what had happened. It's more of a like abstract representation of the suffering. There's also, if you're interested, Spanish films called Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown. It's a very quality film about how people just sort of lost it afterwards. They were like crazy for the sake of being crazy, because for the first time in so many years they were allowed to do things again. And then this painting is the Guernica by Pablo Picasso. And it's symbolic, but at the same time more of a straightforward representation of violence and death. There's, as you can see, the bull and the horse and the man have all been killed. Francisco Franco changed the course of Spanish history. He isolated the nation to the point where nothing foreign was allowed and prolonged an economic depression because of politics. So many works of art were modified to the point of being unrecognizable, and no one knows how much art has yet to be found. Franco serves as a reminder that being of a Western culture and mindset does not provide invincibility against dictators and close-mindedness. Thank you.
Hey, so Dakota, what did you want to say about her speech?